Right, I think we will get going. So thank you everybody for joining. This is our webinar on closing the loop and rethinking sustainable buildings. So we've got some quick introductions. So I am Katie Glaze. I am the Director of Sustainability at Brookbanks. Prior to joining Brookbanks this year, I've had a variety of roles across consultancy, construction, client side, and also at BRE. For those of you that are familiar with the BREEAM scheme, I can only apologise. I was young and didn't know what I was doing, but it did give me a good insight into sustainable buildings. Grant, over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Afternoon all, thanks for joining. I'm Grant. I'm a director within the mechanical and electrical engineering group at Brookbanks. Katie has kindly asked me to join this interesting topic today to include a MEP lens. I've been fortunate enough to been involved in a broad array of projects covering the full life cycle of different types of buildings. It's provided me with a good perspective of the challenges and best practices that we see in achieving sustainable buildings.
Right, so today we're going to discuss the performance gap between operation and design. We're going to look at why this is important, opportunities to bridge that gap, and the process of post-occupancy or occupancy evaluations. We've got a number of case studies and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So you can pop your questions in the chat at the end, and we'll sort of open them up when we get to the end of the presentation. So the next performance gap. So we have taken huge steps in reducing the performance gap between the design of buildings and the construction and handover. So we've got modelling such as TM54 operational energy modelling, we've got TM59 for overheating, TM63, a lot of the certification badges such as BREEAM, Neighbours, Passive House, look at that gap in particular. These are heavily focused on the built form and system performance, and very few of them actually have an opportunity for real life feedback opportunities, and they rely heavily on sort of modelling and compliance and standards. The majority of them are applicable to new developments and major refurbishments, but whilst there is schemes that cover existing buildings, they're definitely not as popular or as well used. So the next logical step is to close that gap between the RIBA 6-7 occupation through to the sort of RIBA 0-1. So using the data from existing assets to inform future projects. So this is by no means a new concept. It's been around for a long time, but the uptake has been relatively limited. So the DfE have got their building performance evaluation procedures, the NHS have got their post-occupancy evaluations, the same with BREEAM. Those of you that remember sort of soft landings from sort of back in 2009, that looked at some of the user behaviours. Only yesterday, the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard announced that they will be doing performance evaluations. So you'll be able to verify your in-use and new assets against the new standard. That'll be coming out later this year. And then we've also got a couple of technical notes, which I'll hand over to Grant to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Yeah, as Katie said, there's lots of information around. And they've been around for some time. Two we've sort of pulled out for these topics are TM22 and TM31, both CPD documents and technical memorandums. If we look at TM22 first, it's in its current form, it's nearly 20 years old now. I mean, it was published back in 2006. Its sort of first iteration was earlier than that, but that mainly focused on office buildings. The 2006 version expanded and updated that methodology. In a nutshell, it's a practical framework for analysing how efficient occupied buildings are, their actual energy use, and that it's sort of formed to help engineers and facilities teams diagnose inefficiencies within the building and improve operational performance. Sort of an important sort of footnote on TM22. People are quite aware of TM54 and that presence at the moment, looking at sort of theoretical design stage, and that was updated in 2022. I believe it was 2022, and that was to bridge the performance gap recognised between design and operation. bit of a theme that was sort of you'll see today as we talk through this presentation. TM31 is essentially a structured operational owner's manual for a building. It focuses on energy efficiency and operation of the life cycle of that building and the management of it. It's something that's heavily prescribed. It's in most people's standard specifications, and it is procured on projects. Is it given enough emphasis? Does it convert over to the other stages? I think that, again, another theme we're reviewing, and we'll be discussing in this. It arrived in 2003. It was updated in 2006 due to Part L and that ever important topic. The industry information is there. It's just making sure people understand it. It's promoted efficiently, and it gets stitched together through the stages of a building.
Yeah, like Grant's just said, that information is there. It's there for the taking. And I've been asked in the past why people don't use these anymore. So, for example, in the likes of BREEAM, the post-occupancy evaluation credit, you used to get the credit from just writing a commitment letter to say that you were going to do it, and there was never any pressure to actually produce one. The same with the NHS and the DFE. There's been very little requirement to actually produce the documents that show that you have done one. And in the past, we've talked about them before, and it's worth noting that some people have associated these with liability issues, and they've perhaps shied away from reviews that might show up defects or issues in fear of liability issues. And whilst this is understandable, the industry has to move forward, and we've got this pile of data that we should be using. So why do these matter? So in sort of typical sustainability style, we'll split the next section up into the 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. So I'll hand over to Grant for the economic side.
Yeah, economic side. So money, always an important topic in anything we're reviewing, construction and building wise. For this specific sort of presentation, we've included a few bullet points, and we'll go through them. As everyone knows, this is an issue impacting everyone now, energy bills, and it's really felt within the UK. We see lots of information in the press, but also technical analysis supporting this through sort of industry bodies and alike. For today, we'll focus on the sort of commercial market. And does the reality of a complex, low energy building meet expectations, whether that be for a new build or an existing? Too often it doesn't. That's what we find. When we think of regulatory changes, incentive schemes, company ESG policies, they've all helped drive the use of clean and renewable technology. But do the occupiers and do the landlords of buildings sense that in energy bills? It's just quite rightly then increased scrutiny on energy efficiency, which is something we like, because it's something like renewable technology, something we've been very familiar with for many years. So it gives us this topic raises up, and it gives us our chance to promote. Sort of cantering through some of the elements a bit quicker. Reduced operational costs. Quite often simple elements are not linked well through the project stages: design, install and maintenance, and the different parts. This can be down sometimes to sort of different parts being involved, contracts kicking in that create challenges, but sometimes it's just missed, and the time constraints of projects and stuff miss it. So stuff like identifying inefficiencies in energy use, whether it be the HVAC, lighting, and maintenance strategies. So if we take some of those elements on board, we can get sort of low maintenance and life cycle costs of buildings. Go away from the if it's not broke, don't fix it. We can actually get some early indication on defects and underperforming systems. And there's a bit of a solution later on we'll discuss that sort of brings that to light a bit more. Enhanced asset value. High performing occupant focused buildings are more desirable in the market. They command higher rents and resale values, and it creates positive word of mouth. So it gets people back into buildings. Very important to create that sort of that team culture and stuff and positivity within buildings, it can do that and really drive things forward. And I think that'll be valuable to people out there to create investment. Reduce capital expenditure over time. This comes back to the sort of feedback loop and a bit that I'm quite conscious of in the M&E world. Just repeating design flaws. It was done on the last project, it gets incorporated again. But where's the lessons learned? Where's the change? Where do we move away from those failures? And then to sort of round this off now, high occupancy retention rates, the buildings that meet users' needs, attract and retain tenants, reduces vacancy rates and associated financial losses, and solutions. So we've raised some of the issues there, but what are the solutions? And we've got some examples later, but it does rely on the buildings, how they're funded and any contract restrictions, but it should definitely be promoted by teams like us and individuals. It's increased involvement, and it allows us to bring out the sort of return of investment and ESG benefits that has. Sort of with energy demands, this needs to get included on all building stock. We're all aware that sort of most of the buildings we'll see in 2050 exist in now around 80 or so plus percentage of buildings. So it's something that needs to raise up as a topic, hence us doing the webinars today. But that's it on the money side, Katie.
So on to the social aspects. So post-occupancy evaluations or occupancy evaluations can deliver strong social value by creating healthier, more productive and more supportive environments for occupants while ensuring buildings evolve in response to real human needs. So what does that actually mean? So the World Health Organization have recognised the built environment as a key determinant for health. By using occupancy evaluations, we can identify and address sort of different environmental factors such as air quality, noise and comfort that will have a direct impact on people's physical and mental health. Particularly when we're looking at things like noise and poor indoor conditions. There's been a huge amount of research over the last sort of 5-10 years that have shown that environmental stresses have a direct impact on people's mental health as well. It can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and making buildings sort of fairly unpleasant to be in the long term. This obviously has a direct impact on people's productivity and performance. So a 2019 study has shown a direct link between workplace conditions, health, and also performance at work. I think we can probably all remember a time where we've had a bit of a post-lunch lag, a little bit heavy-headed, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And granted, this might be linked to your Greg's baguette, but it also might be linked to higher CO levels in the air. It might be linked to poor air change rates and things like that. And common sense will dictate that if you have a healthier building, people feel better, they will work better, they will feel better, they will want to come to work more. And this has a direct link to sort of higher staff satisfaction and retention. I think over the years we've had to accept, particularly since COVID, that people are very much more aware of the buildings that they worked in and they sort of live in as well. There's been the increase in things like biophilic design, and evidence showing that indoor air quality in particular is something that professionals, the study that I'm referring to, it was a group of building professionals, and they identified as air quality as being a real top priority, and it could actually influence their whether they accepted a job offer or not. I've certainly found that. I was down in our Cardiff office this week, which is a brand new refurb of a beautiful building. It's got high ceilings, it's got lovely openable windows, it's got good acoustic conditions. I could talk to my colleagues, but also I was able to jump onto a confidential Teams call and not worry about sort of booming in the background and things like that. And it was a lovely place to be, so much so that I've set up a right move alert for Cardiff now because I'm going to relocate there from Ringwood. But all of these things, like people are more aware of where they are. And we can also use occupancy evaluations in a step further. So if you have an existing asset, whether it be residential or non-resi, you can assess accessibility, inclusivity, and also neurodivergence. So that's a particular area that I'd say, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, has really come to the forefront. RIBA have done a recent webinar on designing for neurodivergence, and they've got technical standards and recommendations now. So we can look at your buildings and see how they perform in that remit, as well as, you know, the sort of energy side as well. Moving on to the environmental side, post-occupancy evaluation helps buildings use less energy, as Grant's already referred to, produce fewer emissions and perform more efficiently over time, while improving the reliability of sustainable design strategies. So it is common sense. You reduce your energy expenditure and you reduce your carbon emissions. So you optimize your HVAC, your lighting and your controls, you reduce the energy consumption, reduce your carbon footprint, and this can go as far as supporting your net zero and decarbonisation targets. Reducing embodied carbon as well. So this is the carbon within the materials, if you like, of the building. I'm going to use a case study for this one, as I think it explains it slightly easier. We were commissioned by an organisation who had made the decision, due to expansion, that they needed to move into a larger office. It meant breaking a lease on their existing office. It meant a full refit, a full fit out of the new office space that they were planning on leasing, and it meant stripping out their existing office. We were originally appointed to do a circular economy statement to see what they could move between the two, but we, on discussion with the client, they didn't actually really want to move, but they felt that they had to, and we were able to, through an occupancy evaluation, identify the inefficient use of spaces. So there were certain areas of the office that they were actually using for storage because nobody wanted to sit there because the lighting was too bad. We'd got rooms that were slightly too small to fit the desks in. They needed multiple screens. They couldn't get as many people in as they want. So again, they were turned into almost sort of informal meeting rooms, dumping rooms. And actually the space that they were using was really quite small in what was actually quite a well-sized office for them. By putting a carbon value on the retention of the existing building, it almost became a bit of a no-brainer to you know, coin a term. They didn't have to break the lease, so there's a financial, but they also didn't have to strip out, they didn't have to refit. So there's a huge amount of embodied carbon that we're saving just by taking a step back, talking to the occupants about what didn't work for them and what did work for them. And we were able to adapt that office space to a way that did work for them. We can also extend the building lifespan. So Grant again has referred to this in the economic side. So the early detection of faults reduces deterioration, the need for premature replacement of building services in particular, and that also works the other way around too. Particularly in the public sector, it's quite often to find a planned maintenance strategy. It says on year X the boilers must be replaced in building Y. Again, it goes to the if it isn't broken, don't fix it adage. And by using occupancy evaluations, we can identify where systems are still working fine. They might need a minor tweak, and we can continue that lifespan of the building services. I'm using building services. This is the main area that we can get this saving in. The other slightly different side of it is certification verification. So this is primarily looking at the likes of BREEAM and WELL certification. A lot of the certifications are used for marketing. So people will purchase a building that's got a green badge, if you like it, on it. Anyone that's gone through the process of a BREEAM assessment will know that the evidence doesn't necessarily have to be that robust. And even BRE are very clear on the fact that that badge is at the point of time that it was given that badge. So we are able to effectively review the performance of the building to see if it is still at that BREEAM Excellent, BREEAM Outstanding level, or whatever the badge was at the time. And it prevents underperforming green design strategies. And we can use this to inform the future sustainable design. It's lessons learned, what worked, what didn't. Are we over specifying boilers because it's just in a standard spec? Are we having to put additional heating in because we've under specified? Are we having to cool rooms that didn't need cooling? We need artificial light. So we can use the information to adapt and inform the next round. So the approach to post-occupancy evaluation or evaluations. So getting down into the nitty-gritty of how we would actually do one of these. So The scope of an occupancy evaluation really does depend on the driver of it, whether it's coming from somebody like the DFE or BREEAM, or if it is a client-led requirement. But these on the screen in front of you are the sort of the 6 kind of key areas that we would look at. So if you've got a relatively newly constructed or refurbished building, the first thing we would do is review the design intent. So what parameters was the building designed to? What were the performance specs? And we would talk to the architect, MEP, client, contractors, civil structures. If there's BREEAM assessors on board, we would talk to them and generally get a feeling of how they felt that design process went and the construction process went. Perhaps the sort of key person in all of this, particularly in the non-domestic sector, is your facilities and estates managers, because they are the front line of everything. They're most likely to be the person that was involved in the commissioning of the building, but they are also the first person that gets the phone call when the shower breaks or the door doesn't work or it's too hot or too cold. So we tend to hold face-to-face interviews and then go on to a FM-led site inspection where they can show us round the building. They can show us the good, the bad, the ugly. And we like to repeat these quarterly because then we get a real understanding of how the building operates throughout the year. We then also speak to the building occupiers. The method of doing this will depend on the type of building. So in the likes of schools, hospitals, care homes, we will talk to staff, but we will also talk to residents or students as well. The format can change face to face. We can do a QR code that they can scan and fill in their own time. We can do email links, we can do paper ones. Again, we like to repeat these quarterly so that we get a full view of how these buildings are operating. I'm going to take a break from speaking and hand over to Grant for the next one.
Yeah, the building services performance element. I mean, we can see the key points listed there. Those are the ones that sort of pull out and get done for a POE. A lot of emphasis is on the facilities maintenance, and there's some obvious ones that we discuss, like set points, time clocks, effective energy profiling, all that sort of being optimized once operations underway. But I suppose I'll just go down to something in a bit more detail. So a lot of these buildings and complex buildings that use high energy have got a BMS, building management system, and there's sort of technology and equipment available that can interface and capture that data of the system. And coupled with sort of like quite a nice produced Power BI dashboard, can bring it up to the surface so it can all be seen. And it could be benchmarked energy, so we know what that we're going to see from that building. That can either be predicted or through early operation. And then what it can do, it can set alarms and flag up if there's if there's some plant that's faulty and it's breaking down, and say like a motor, it's not fallen over yet, so it's not stopped working. It hasn't raised any alarms on the BMS. Well, what this will do, it should flag that there's a real specific usage of energy there, and to go and explore deeper. And you think a motor that using a lot of energy could break down over a couple of years, and that's so much wasted energy, and we just wouldn't be aware of it. So it can help with that. So it does depend on the client's appetite, but it also depends on us promoting it and showing that these tools are available. And my belief is the ROI is always there for these elements, and that can be then extended for sort of other practical uses. We could that sort of dashboard could be changed for something like, I had a client in education, and it could take the next generation on that journey to understand the importance of energy use, and it could all be sort of nicely tabled, and you can see what that building is doing when, and it gives you the ability to do that. On a more sort of practical note, then it's just if we've got the data and the data is used correctly and it's stitched together from design, operation, any change that happened for that building, it can be informed, and then it can be optimized. So looking at airflow rates and stuff like that. So I think they're the important ones for building services performance. A bit of an example there, Katie.
Yeah, we've had our 5-minute warning, so I'm going to up the pace a little bit.
It's not like us.
no, I know. So environmental monitoring. So we will use data loggers to look for things like TVOC and formaldehyde levels, CO levels, like I mentioned after your Greg's BAP, that's your likely cause, particulate matter in the air, lighting levels, temperature, humidity. And the longer that we have the data loggers in place, the better view of the building that we can get and start to identify patterns as to why things might be happening. And then there's also additional sort of visual and site inspection. So in the past, we've been asked to do sort of full snagging inspections, even after this sort of defects period. Full building surveys, we can bring the building surveyors in. Thermographic surveys can be very beneficial. And then also the accessibility and inclusivity reviews. So this is great. We've talked about how we've got all of the data, but what on earth do we do with it? So typically we would do a detailed post-occupancy evaluation report or an occupancy evaluation report to the client and the project team, if that's what the client would like us to do. That can be in the form of a formal report. We would do a presentation, dissemination. And we can also do the formal feedback where there is a requirement from DfE, NHS, BREEAM, etc. What you do with that data very much depends on why you were doing the post-occupancy evaluation in the first place. If it's just to tick a box, that's lovely, we've done your report. But what we can also do is then use that information to look at functional adaptability planning. What can we do to improve that space? We can look at upgrade and maintenance options of the building services. We can do refurbishment options. By doing these surveys, we can start looking at pre-refurbishment audits earlier on, and we can link that to sort of life cycle costing exercises. In the past, we've used the data to update standard performance specs and designs. This is particularly useful where you have a large portfolio of repeated designs. So the house builders, for example, care home providers, schools, where you've got a base build design, we can tweak that with the knowledge that we've gained from the occupancy evaluations from the previous round. And we can also look at things like energy profiling, so modulating energy options. That's particularly good if your demand is lower than you'd expected. We can look at different metering and different controls. I'm really flying through now because we've only got 3 minutes. So I've got a couple of case studies. I'm going to whiz through this one though. So we were commissioned by a care home provider. So they do a very standard design, and they change effectively the cladding to suit the local area. It's a tried and tested design. They've been using it for a number of years. This particular one was 112 bed. It was a nursing care home. Design parameters were BREEAM 2018. The client had thermal comfort as a priority, which is very standard in care homes. They also required a significant improvement in Part L, and in this one they hadn't done the operational energy modelling. They didn't need to. We did in-person interviews of the residents and the FM team. We did online questions for the staff, the nursing staff and the domiciliary staff, and then we did interviews with the design team, client team and contractors, as well as the site tour and the FM interview. So the initial findings came back very, very quickly, almost immediately. We could see that there were certain issues. So thermal performance was an issue. The dining rooms were overheating to the point that the residents weren't able to eat in the dining room, and they were having to eat in their room. Certain rooms were colder than expected, and there didn't seem to be a pattern as to where these were. There were drafts, cold spots. The nursing staff were unhappy where the pharmacy was located. It was an L-shaped building. The pharmacy was at the far end of one of the L's, which meant that the nursing stations on the other side had to walk the entire length of the building and upstairs from the ground floor to get to the pharmacy. There were security concerns. The BMS wasn't working. There was higher operating costs. All parties cited communication issues between the site teams, the design teams and the client. And then there was a number of errors with the clash detection between the architectural drawings and the MEP, which had actually resulted in them having to cut through some fireboarding and then replace that because there was some servicing that needed to go through a wall effectively. We then were commissioned to do secondary surveys. So because we'd got the thermal performance issues, we did a visual survey with the building surveyors and a thermographic survey, and we found that there were defective door and window seals. There was problems with the insulation continuity. The BMS had not actually been commissioned as claimed, and there was been a change in the FM team from when the building was handed over. So the new FM team hadn't had that handover. The contractor was required to do some repairs. It was still within their defect period, and it was actually one of their subcontractors was required to do quite a lot of repairs. We did additional training for the FM team to get them to understand how to use the BMS in particular. We then helped the client to update their performance spec and their standard designs, and we advised on secondary ventilation within the dining rooms. What was actually happening there is they had underfloor heating that had been programmed to come on at 8 o'clock in the morning, which meant that it wasn't warm enough for breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. So they were using supplementary heating to whack the temperature up in there. The underfloor heating, being a long lag system, was kicking in. By midday, everybody was roasting. So it just needed a programming change to get the heating system to come on at 5, so it was at a comfortable temperature for 8 o'clock. So it was a really simple thing, but it changed, that was a huge saving in energy because they weren't having to use the supplementary heating. There's a number of other examples there that I will leave on the screen. I won't go into because I'm very conscious that we have used all of our time. There we go. Just loading up questions that come through.
Yeah, I was just loading them as well. The Brookbanks difference. We've listed some of the good reasons there why to get Brookbanks involved. Some of our values and why we look at stuff runs through most of the elements we do. But as you say, Katie, it's probably more some time for some questions. I noticed we've had a good one from Joss. Joss, thanks for
that's
joining
a really
us
good
today.
Question, actually.
Yeah, it's a nice question, that is. From my perspective, I'd say.
Can everybody see that question? Do you want me to read it out? I don't know if everyone can see it. Oh, yeah, there's a thumbs up. People can see it. That's good.
That's good. I'll sort of read it anyway, so I'm answering it as a reading. If the contractor's proposals differ from employer's requirements, how's best recorded that change for someone who wasn't involved? So first of all, I'd say it would be nice to know if there was hopefully the consultant were monitoring the project or is involved. Let's say in this instance it's design and build, so they're monitoring. Hopefully they would spot that change. If they didn't, I would say that the building logbook would be the best place to put that down. And then it comes back to the bit that Katie mentioned. Try and move away from liability and have some open and honest conversations about it, and then break down what's the most important for the client. And that would be from sort of hierarchy. So what regulatory would be important, comfort for the building, and then energy. So taking that view really would be my. But it is a good question. I'd say honest and open conversation.
It happens a lot as well. I think it's fair to say that a vast portion of the projects that I've worked on, there have been differences between the CPs and the ERs, and that in this case, I think there has to be some responsibility from the client to check those CPs when they come in, when the tender documents come in. Like, are you actually getting the building that you want and you've asked for?
Yeah, I like that question. I haven't seen any other questions come through, Katie. I'll just check the chat.
If anyone has any questions, you're very welcome to give us a call or email in as well. We're always happy to, as you might have noticed, Grant and I are both quite passionate about this subject, hence why it's now 1:05. If anybody has any questions or would like to chat anymore, please do just give us a call. All our contact details, I think, are on the website. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And I think this goes on to YouTube in about a week if anybody wants to have another look at it or share it with your colleagues.